And we're on the record. So, so today we are going to be talking about how can you really dig into what that company culture is like before you actually have the chance to immerse yourself in it. There's only so much that a job description can really tell you, right? So first and foremost, the thing to know more than anything else is, what are your priorities? So before you even open up that job description, it's critical that you get to know what your priorities are and what you see yourself as needing in a company culture. Knowing what your priorities are, everything from the management style that you need out of both your direct manager and the executive team. The social interactions, is it hybrid or is it remote? How does the company make decisions? All of these things can be really critical in determining the type of job that you're going after. And so one of the first things that we do with all of our clients, anybody that's worked with us can tell you that it's one of the first things that we do is we say, okay, what do you need, right? Because so much of the job application process is, how are you a fit for the job? This is where you get to ask yourself, how is the job a fit for you, right? So you always want to start with that question. We actually have a great resource on our website and something that we use with all of our clients called the Opportunity Tracker. It's the Priority Scorecard and Opportunity Tracker, where we have a list of different priorities. Company culture is chief among them and woven into every fiber of the document, where we actually have clients sit down and write out what their priorities are and define each of those priorities. Everything from like base salary, management style, all of those things that I previously listed, down to like parking, right? And so knowing all of these things about yourself, parking probably isn't high on the list, although it can be, it's on the list for a reason, is the first step, right? In being able to ask yourself with every job description that you look at and saying, is this a place that aligns with my needs, my values? I actually can show you what ours looks like, but we actually start by saying, what am I looking for? And we have this whole list of different things that you can look for. As I had mentioned, it's everything from work-life balance, long-term career goals. Is this a place that has really great management training program? Is it something that has a lot of opportunity for growth or promotes from within? So these are all things that play into a company's culture. So we have a whole list of things that clients can choose from, and then we ask them to define what these are and then rank what is your number one priority. And then, as you'll see over here, we actually have clients assess every single one of these priorities that they choose and they define. We have them assess every application based on these priorities. If this is a system that you like, it's on our website. You can take a look at it. It is available to you. It's also something that if you're working with us, you will almost most definitely use. So knowing your priorities is a giant first step in assessing career culture. Or company culture, excuse me. Okay, so how do you figure out, once you know your own priorities, how do you figure out what a company culture is like for a company? Well, obviously you've got your job description, but that can oftentimes be pretty limiting. So before you even hit submit, you're going to want to take a look at the company's mission, like really get to know that company website. I can't tell you how many people I talk to who say, well, I looked at the job description, I still don't really know what they do. Oh, wait, that should go without saying, like, know the company's website. You really want to take a look at their mission. Their careers page will oftentimes have their core values and really lean into like what they're all about, or at least what their messaging is on what they're all about. So that career page can be really helpful. Social media and LinkedIn can oftentimes be a better indicator of what they're authentically like, things that they post about, things their people post about. Getting to like taking a look at their LinkedIn page, a company's LinkedIn page, and looking at some of the people that actually work there, and in particular, some of the people on the teams that you'd be working with, and seeing what they're all about and how they position themselves on social media can often be an indicator of a company's culture. Glassdoor is an excellent place to look at reviews of companies, although sometimes you need to look at it with a little bit of a grain of salt, because they will, in often cases be kind of like, it can often be kind of like Yelp in terms of, disgruntled employees, things like that, that will that will often complain about things that they've noticed over rejoicing. But if you're consistently seeing reviews on Glassdoor that are overwhelmingly pointing to the same thing, sometimes there's truth in it. Company media and press releases. What is the company putting out there into the world? What are they leading into? Is this a company that's like really focused on investment and growth, or are they really focused on their product news, right? Where is the company kind of situating? Really getting to know how they're talking about themselves. And then networking and word of mouth. There is absolutely no better way to learn about what it's like to be at a company than by talking to people who actually work at the company. Okay. So speaking of actually talking to people, when you're in the interview, how do you assess this? You can probably read up on a lot of things, but getting to know and talking to your interviewer, to the people who actually work there, the people who will be on your team, is the best way to really assess this. And one of the major mistakes people make in interviews is they don't effectively ask the right questions to assess what that company culture is about. So this is just a smattering of like just a sprinkle of questions you could ask. I probably could have put 100 questions on this list, but we don't have that amount of time. So think of it as the way that you get asked questions in interviews. Either situational, scenario, background, all the different interview types. You should be asking questions in the same way and getting that interviewer to think about things the same way that you're having to think about. So, the basic of like, what's your favorite part of working here? If they get really excited about certain things, that can be a really big indicator. If they have to like really think about, well, what do I actually like about working here? You're gonna notice, right? Really digging into feedback and management style and asking the person that would be your manager, what is your management style? And have they really given it some thought? How do they respond to that? Are they really being able to give you feedback and saying, I really believe in a 360 review process, and I really believe in the collaboration and getting that feedback from people who have a different set of skills than I do? Or are they saying, yeah, I'll kind of let people like do their own thing and, make sure they get their work done and all that? Like, figure out, how does this person manage, right? And does it align with the way you want to be managed? Asking them not what is work-life balance, like how is the work-life balance? Because if you just ask somebody, how's work-life balance here in an interview, they're putting on their best face. They're probably gonna say, oh, it's pretty good. But if you ask them, what does work-life balance mean to you? That's gonna be a big indicator for like, do they think work-life balance is like, I can put down my work at 5 o'clock and go home? Or is it the flexibility to be able to get work done? The way they answer the question of what it means to them might be an indicator of how the company is perceiving work-life balance as well. Knowing the way the company socializes, team building activities, this could be a giant green flag or a red flag, depending on your personality type. Maybe you're somebody who's like, I have no interest in happy hour. Or you're somebody who's like, I love when companies give me volunteer opportunities or days to go volunteer and do things. So asking about what those opportunities really look like, for better or for worse, can tell you a little bit more of how the company like works with its people, both in the day-to-day and more on a holistic perspective. Here's absolutely one of my favorites, is how does the company or team handle failure or challenge? And even a better way to ask this is, tell me about a time when your team had to navigate a major failure or challenge, and asking them to give examples of how they have navigated hard times. Talking about wins and favorite clients and things like that is great, but asking them to talk about something difficult. Like, can you tell me how you've worked through things in the past, especially in the last 2 years, goodness, can be a really big indicator on what it would be like to have to navigate those challenges with a team. I love this one too. Somebody actually told me they asked this a couple weeks ago in an interview, and I loved it. They asked, what advice would you give yourself on your first day to be successful here? Which I loved, like, especially if it's somebody who has maybe been with the company for a while, asking, like, what would you tell yourself now, looking back? Like, what would you do differently, or what would you do to make sure that you were successful? Because that can give you some indicators on their like retrospect, on their like, okay, hindsight, what would I say? Like, what would I learn? What would I do maybe differently? So this is just a smattering of questions that you could kind of consider asking, but getting the person on the other side of the table to really dig into the different aspects of working at a company is critical in understanding what it's really like to work there. All right, red flags. Things that you just want, like immediately, just immediately have concern, right? Vague job descriptions. And Ellen is going to help me out here in just a moment and show us some like messy job descriptions. So job descriptions that maybe don't give you any insight. Maybe they don't tell you enough about the job, or they don't tell you anything about what it's about, like what it's actually like to work there. If you can't really get a sense of what this role is all about, immediate red flag. Like just, I would even consider like wanting to ask more questions before even applying, because you want to know that they've really given some thought to a job description before just like throwing it out there. If the interview process is messy, if it's overly long or short or vague or sporadic, or they'll say, oh, we'll get back to you on this date, and then it takes them like 3 weeks longer. Messy interview process can be an indicator of what it is like to work at that company. The overuse of buzzwords. Now, everybody, I equate this to like the real estate world. When you see a real estate listing that tells you that an apartment is cozy, you probably can already tell that that is a small apartment, right? So if there's an overuse of things like go-getter, hustle mentality, or works well under intense pressure, like things that are like overly used, they're over hammering certain things and trying to make certain things sound really good and like really positive things. Try to read what those buzzwords are actually saying, right? Now, of course, that jargon is in job descriptions almost all the time, but if they're relying on those more than anything else, that's going to maybe be a red flag to you that this role could require a lot more from you. The idea, here's a good example, startup mentality when they are like pre-IPO, right? When this is a company who has like 500 employees or something, and they're like, you need to have a startup mentality. What that might tell you is that it is maybe an understaffed or underpaid role, right? So really thinking like, ooh, does this align with what it should be? That doesn't necessarily mean don't apply, don't pursue the opportunity, but definitely let it perk up your ears and ask the right questions. If they're emailing you on the weekends, in the evenings, at night, in the morning, at all hours of the day about an interview process, that is definitely going to tell you that that is something that is the norm for, if not just that person, for the company's culture on the whole. Okay. And some people are okay with that, but definitely like pay attention to when they are sending those emails and how that process is really working. Similar, if they're pressuring you to schedule on their time, like if they're really pushing, like I need to meet with you today, if I need to meet with you tomorrow, like if they're not giving you that bandwidth to like, look at your own schedule, that can also be a giant red flag of the way not just their interview process will go, but perhaps how they expect you to manage your time within the company. If they're not paying attention to you, if they're in the interview and they're just scrolling through their phone, or they're over here, like maybe they're taking notes, but it's very obvious that their attention is not on you, that can also be a flag of, do they actually, like, what do they need out of this candidate? What do they actually expect out of me? Is this person actually paying attention? Because in an interview process, just like you're putting your best foot forward, so are they. And if that's what their best foot is, you can surely expect that that's what you can expect from them moving forward. In the interview process, if you ask multiple people similar questions about company culture and maybe what it's like to work there, or what expectations are, and you're getting some inconsistencies, I would definitely call that a red flag, because typically you should kind of see some some like cohesiveness amongst expectations, what they, you know, want out of team, what it's like to work there. You should definitely see some consistency among that. So if you start seeing some like potholes, you know that something might be up. All right, enough about red flags. Let's talk about green flags. Good things to celebrate. If a company's flow of communication, if they're responsive and getting back to you, and if they tell you like I'll get back to you by Friday, and they even get back to you by Thursday, then like, and the flow of communication is just authentic, that can be a giant signal that like this is an enjoyable person and team to communicate with and collaborate with. If they really lean heavily, especially on their website, where they focus on learning, development, and fostering the expertise of their team, that is a giant sign that they really care about the experience of their employees. The conversation just feels good. You may have gone through interviews where you just walk away feeling like, gosh, I feel energized. And speaking strictly as an introvert, the minute I walk away from an interview feeling like pumped up and ready to go, and like that to me is like, oh, I don't feel drained and tired from talking to strangers. That's a good sign, right? They have clear expectations about what work-life balance is. They have really clear understand the team can speak to the way their days are structured, the way that they're willing and open to sharing it. It's a great sign. If they have a lot of high tenured employees that have been there for a really long time and there's low turnover, it's a great signal. And actually, if you're talking to an entire team for a company that's been around for a while, that has been there for, less than 18 months, and that can actually be a sign of like, oh, this is a company where people move on pretty quickly. So having a low turnover is actually a really good sign. The recruitment process, I feel like all of this goes into that, but if you just are enjoying the recruitment process and just feeling like people are getting back to you and you're not sweating bullets, it's a great sign. And then kind of speaking more to the social media, hiring, the way that they have invested in talking about their hiring and careers page and all of those elements, whether it's their website, their like recruitment team, social media, all of it. If you can really tell that you get a sense of what it's like to work there, that could be a really good green flag. However, sometimes maybe, and I've seen it happen before, where they have great hiring pages, everything looks so like hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden people come back and are like, oh, this is not what I expected. But by and large, I would say, like, if they're investing time and effort in how they're presenting themselves to candidates, to talent, then that's a good sign. Ellen, I am actually going to stop my share and let you pop on with some with those job descriptions.
Sounds good.
Okay.
One thing that, speaking of culture, that I've seen a lot lately is people have been talking about Meta. A couple people have made some comments lately, like one person recently left and they were basically talking about how that was such a great thing. So like, look at some of the stuff on LinkedIn too, just if you Google certain jobs, because on their, you could either Google culture, but like if you go instead of the search bar and type in a company name, sometimes when you scroll down, you can start to see some different posts that people have named, and you, good, bad, or ugly, right? Take it for what it is. But that's something just to kind of keep in mind as another avenue, because I read it the other day and I was like, this is like the second or third post I've seen about this company, or as companies are doing layoffs and how they handle it, people are getting a little vocal. And so you can start to see stuff just by, like, what Liz said, just randomly reading things. One of the things we wanted to also just kind of showcase is when it comes to job descriptions, like looking at some of the key items on there and like, what are they advertising? What are they telling us? I just pulled a couple just for some examples. This one is, an executive level role, and, we get kind of an understanding of what the company's offering. It's a late stage biotech. And then, one of the things that was a little interesting on this one is like execute with urgency as part of their values. In some ways that makes sense because they're, biotech, but you might want to just kind of have some questions about like, what does that really mean? Like, does that mean everything is immediate and that I stay up all hours of the night? Or like, what are the expectations in the organization when, if that's one of their values, how does it align with yours? As you continue to kind of go down, we get the position summary and who it reports to. So we obviously know that they respect the position. But one of the things that was interesting, and I will scroll slowly so I don't make you guys all sick from my scrolling, is that there's really not anything about what the candidate gets, right? So it's everything that we're looking for as an employer, but there's not really anything on the flip side. So it's like, okay, well, do you offer vacation time? And, previously, like a lot of companies didn't really have a whole lot. It was just simply like, this is the job description and go with it. But now we're starting to see a lot more. So a lot more companies are really trying to advertise that. So if we take a look at this one is a similar role. It's a people and culture role, head of people. And if we keep going down to the bottom, one of the things, it's basically the same concept, responsibilities and qualifications. But then they start to tell me a little bit more about what I can get from them as a candidate. It's not overly involved, it's not extreme, but it does tell me about a robust benefit package. I can have short-term and long-term disability, paid sick days. So it's definitely going to be a little bit interesting to see, how would this company respond and what kind of company culture do they have? Because they obviously want people to know that they have these offerings. And so, not that you want to assume bad about the other company, but you just kind of want to be conscientious of like, what are the things that you're going to be receiving? Like, is it a value in the marketplace? Like, is the compensation going to be of market value? Is the benefits going to be the same? So, there's definitely a lot of pull right now with companies in terms of how they are handling this. And some people are having to, especially in Colorado, you're required to post the salary information. And then some other companies are going kind of getting away from that if they're remote roles by removing Colorado in the job description. So you'll start to see that. And then California is going to be adding that in. So you'll start to see some differences as things change. But, just good things to kind of keep an eye on, kind of have a better understanding of how this is appropriate for you and what are you looking for, like with the opportunity scorecard, what are those things that you want and does this fit that? And you have to obviously ask more questions, but just kind of as a first sneak peek at the company, this can be some good insight. Now, there's also some other things to think about. So if you've ever heard of Simon Sinek, he has, start with why. Now, I'm not going to make you read all this because it is extremely long, so we will not bore you to that degree. But this is a personal assistant role that I saw, and it was posted a while ago. But I found it fascinating because one, because of the length of it, and two, because of what they wanted you to do. So when you see job descriptions like this, I'll keep scrolling slowly, not because you need to read it, but I want to show you something. So if you go all the way down here, it keeps going. Read what it says here. If you're still smiling, here's the list of things you need to do to apply. And so they want all of this stuff. So this is basically a test in its own right. So that means they're looking for a certain type of personality that will not just randomly apply, but that specifically wants to work for an organization like that. Like this is part of their interview test, right? So the part of that is did you read the application fully? Like it's easy for people just to use LinkedIn to, easy apply. And then all of a sudden they don't even know who they applied for. So like in its own right, like, yes, this is extremely comprehensive. It's pretty, exhaustive. Look, you have 3 tests: spatial reasoning, verbal ability, math, and logic. So you kind of have to ask yourself, like, where does it end, right? Like, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? But then in some cases, it's like, okay, well, what kind of company culture do they have and what kind of employees are they if this is what they require? So there's a good and bad to both sides. And some people can handle this depth and some people can't. So it's all about personality and what's going to fit you the best. Even here, they're looking at 1 to 2 minute videos. And so there's a lot of things that you can see that some of these places are going to try. And so, you kind of have to say, okay, well, is this going to turn me away, or is it going to, make me want to run to them? So this is a fascinating one to me, just because of the depth that it asks. And then, I find it fascinating because then it makes me wonder, like, okay, well, how do you operate as a team? Like, why do you need all of this? Right. And so there's always a good and there's a bad and there's a pro and a con, it just depends on how you respond to that kind of stuff. So some people would love this and some people would hate it. So, it's just a fascinating thing to think that, one, it would be that long of a job description, and then two, it would be that long of a process. So definitely kind of evaluate it based on what you're seeking and what you want it to be. This one I really like a lot, because if you look at the very top, this role, which one was this again? This is, sorry for scrolling so badly. You can see how long it is. But they go through about their commitment, they go through their position summary. And then what's nice is that they talk about their requirements, and then they break it down by the different categories. So it's easy for the job seeker to understand. It's not written in some kind of crazy format. And then down here, this is obviously what they're looking outside of just requirements. But they definitely were very specific. They even had a person named in this post, which has become a little bit more rare. It used to be relatively normal to have contacts, but now they don't. But it even gives you all of these things, even the comp and the benefits. And so this is a very, really helpful post for applicants. So there's definitely a lot of things to consider for a company like this that really takes the time and the initiative to supply all this stuff. So they really want you to know what you're getting into before you even get there. So it can definitely be a very helpful part of the process. So, and then last but not least, this job description, this is for the St. Louis Blues, and this is a hockey team. And this one was a lot of work for this company. So they obviously know what they're looking for, and it's very specific. So you can see that there's a wide range. Like on here, they wanted sample releases. It's a communications executive position. They wanted a media story. They wanted positive influence story. So all of that to say, thoroughly read the job description, because it will tell you a lot, like Liz had talked about, with, just how do you want to handle this organization? Like, what are some questions that you might have based on things that you've read in the marketplace, based on things that you've read in the job descriptions, and why are they asking certain things? Like for the Simon Sinek role, why do you have to have all that? I'd be curious just to understand their background behind it and how they think that adds value to the organization. And so sometimes it's more about evaluating, well, you may not want to do it, someone else might think it's a great concept. So we all fit different places and fit in different ways. And so the job descriptions can definitely kind of give us some insight that maybe we didn't even think about or didn't even know about, and can kind of tell a story to us that is a little bit different than what we initially expected. So I'll stop sharing, and then you guys can ask any questions or comments or anything that we might need to talk through.